It's a volunteer group of expert occupational therapists. This group was formed in 2019. We've completed several projects and publications, and some of them are listed here. And for more information, I invite you to visit our blog, indianotthinktank.blogspot.com. And also for the previous Saturday night chat sessions, let me quickly go. There are some more folks, and let me admit them into the meeting. All right, so the recordings of the previous Saturday night chat sessions are available on our YouTube channel as well. So I request you to, if you didn't participate or you missed the chance to join the conversation, you could at least get a chance to see what's being discussed. About this initiative, I know one of our missions is to explore the issues that influence occupational therapy practice in India. So in this initiative, we are planning to brainstorm some of the contemporary issues that affect OT practice in India. And why are we doing this? To resolve an issue or understanding the issue. I mean, to resolve an issue, first we need to understand the issue. And then also, when different minds come together, for a conversation, we definitely unearth the different perspectives and views related to that issue. And also to come up with some innovative ideas and solutions. Some of you may have some great ideas that might benefit the entire OT community. And also, through this discussion, definitely we may learn something new. And every day is a learning journey, so we can definitely learn something from each other. And so the format of this initiative is to just kind of have a 60 to 75-minute discussion on a topic. And there'll be a moderator and a co-moderator. And today it's Dr. Murali Krishnan, the moderator, and I'm your co-moderator. And who will benefit from this initiative? All of us are here, those of us who are here, the participants, and then the OT community in India and OT community in other parts of the world, and also any stakeholders of the OT profession. About the initiative, so we'll as I mean, the session is being recorded, so the recording will be posted on IOTT's YouTube channel, and then the link will be shared on the IOTT social media pages and blogs, etc., to disseminate the recording. And also, we may, if we sense there is a need for a resource or something, then we'll discuss that in our quarterly meetings, and then see whether how we can help you, help the OT community. And also we may come up with some publications based on the insights generated through the discussion. And again, I invite any of you, the participants here, if you think that you want to write a commentary or an article out of this, please feel free to do so, but acknowledge IOTTT. Here are some expectations. We could see that I told a little more than 30 have registered, but we have around 10 people in the call, or even less than that. So if you sign up, please show up, come prepared and actively participate, because if all of us are going to be passive observers or listeners, then we cannot generate a rich conversation. So feel free to share your perspective and try to stay on the topic and be concise and clear with your viewpoints, and cooperate with the moderators. And
Karthik, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm seeing the screen. I'm only seeing your initials there. Is it the same with everybody, or is everyone see the slides there?
Yeah, because my screen is probably the network, but I'm just kind of using the same slide deck that we prepared for the session one. I mean, the first chat session. All right.
It.
Anyway, I'm almost done. I'm the last slide that I'm just going to turn the control over to you. All right. Let's not accuse and make this as a more constructive discussion. And you can definitely constructively critique what's going on in India. There's no doubt, but let's not point a person or accuse anyone. Remember, the session is again recorded. Your participation indicates your consent. With that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite Dr. Murali Krishnan to guide us through this conversation. Dr. Murali Krishnan, over to you.
Hi everyone, very good evening and very happy to have you all here in the third IOTTT Saturday Night Chat session. And today's session is basically themed on documentation in occupational therapy, and this is going to be a discussion where we will talk about how or what documentation procedures we are using and the importance of it, or where we are lacking and how we can improve ourselves better. The discussion and the questions will circle around this concept. But before going into the discussion, I would like to invite everyone to introduce yourself briefly in the name list order. May I invite Dr. Divisha Shikekar?
Dr. Devesha, would you like to introduce yourself? All right, we can move on to the next one, probably.
Okay, no, and I think next we have Gita.
Hello. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gita Jyoti Ojha, and I'm working as an occupational therapist in Indian Institute of Human Behavior and Allied Sciences at Delhi, and nearly 17 years of experience in mental health. And recently, I've been included in the SLD board and into the forensic mental health unit also. So I'm doing assessments for that.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Gita.
Thank you.
And may I invite Dr. Kiruba, please?
Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. So this is Kripa Priscilla from Chennai. I'm working as assistant professor in SRM College of Occupational Therapy. And yeah, I completed my bachelor's and master's in the same institution, and I started working as an assistant professor there. Yeah, that's all about me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Maria?
Hello, this is.
May I invite Dr. Maria?
Yeah, she's speaking. Go ahead.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Hello, this is Dr. Maria here. I'm from KMC's College of Occupational Therapy. I've had 10 years experience working in Sri Lanka, Singapore, and India in pediatrics as well as geriatrics. That's a brief about me.
Wonderful.
And I've also catered to sensory integration.
What's it? Could you please repeat that?
Thank you, Dr. Maria.
Catered to sensory integration from the University of Southern California.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
And okay, I invite Dr. Shirish Lala to introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shirish Lala. I am an academic fellow coordinator and professor at Daytona State College for an Occupational Therapy Assistant program. My primary area of practice is geriatrics, and I live in the Orlando area of Florida. Thank you.
Thank you. And in that process, before starting, I forgot to introduce myself there. But I'm
two more as well.
I am the.
We have Ashley, Maria, okay. Babu, and Sukumar.
I don't see their names in my list. Okay.
Okay. I will ask them. Dr. Ashley, Maria, Babu, would you like
Please.
to introduce yourself?
Hi, good evening all. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, I recently completed my MOT and I worked for 6 months in mental health. Then after that I resigned. Then I'll join soon in Qatar. That's a brief about me.
Got it.
In a child development center. That's it.
Sure. Sukumar?
Good evening, everyone. This is Sukumar, occupational therapist. I am practicing in Dental. I run an NGO. I have a 50-bedded psychosocial rehabilitation center, and I also run a special school in Dental. So this is a brief about me, and hi to everyone.
Welcome. Yeah, Amurli, yeah, you can go ahead and introduce yourself and then continue the conversation.
I'm very sorry. I couldn't see their names in my
No worries.
contact list here. Anyway. Okay. I'm basically Murali Krishnan, Director and Clinical Head at Spandan Life Skills Enhancement Center. I was working as a professor with the JKK for almost 10 years, and then I was with Meenakshi Academy of Higher Education and Research for a couple of years. And presently I'm associated with Indian OT think tank and also with IOTTT. No, this is just the thing. I'm more of a clinician now than the academician. But nevertheless, today's discussion is basically on documentation. And we all know the importance of documentation, and mostly people from other than India, they pretty much we think they do the better part of documentation process. And even in India, there are some institutions which do better documentation comparatively to others. The disparity of documentation is very much seen or very much evident when it comes to clinical practice and academic institutes. Academic institutes seem to have some sort of documentation to some extent, but the clinical practice wise is where we are lacking the documentation process. And we do know, the contradicting factor is from the academic institutions, the documentation of clinical practice is still lacking. As in, the reports doesn't go out from the colleges to the people of referral sources. From the clinical side, we do send out our reports, but do we keep the reports? Do we maintain the documentation of every year, every follow-up? And how do we do and what do we do? Is there a standard way of documenting all around the country, or at least for that matter in a state, even in that case? Would like to take everybody's opinion in this aspect. Like, if you're following documentation process, what is the convenient documentation process you are using, and what is the, according to you, what is the right way of documentation process, or the tool, including the documentation tool you're using? And we would go with Karthik first.
Okay. So I've been a clinician both in India as well as in the US, before getting into administrative and academic roles. So even currently I'm affiliated with a student-run clinic of our university where I supervise students and help them document stuff. So in the Western world, the perspective on documentation has always been very high for a couple of major reasons. One, it's reimbursement driven, because OT services in the Western world are pretty much reimbursed through either government funded insurance or third party insurance. So in order to justify and prove that the service was delivered, there's high pressure on documentation. That is a necessity, a pure necessity for documentation for that major reason. I'm not telling that is the only reason that we should document, but that is a driving force here that put a lot more emphasis, and that encourages the employers to provide a percentage of the paid time to help clinicians document services. So in terms of effective methods, when I practiced in India, I used to keep a file for each client, and then I have an assessment form. I complete at the end of the assessment and put them in the file. And whenever I send a report to my referral source or a progress report to the client, I maintain a copy there. In addition, for daily notes, I just kind of in that file, I added papers like white sheets, and then kind of put the date, and then write a brief summary of either in bulleted format or paragraph format. That's how I did. I mean, I'm talking about the time frame that's between 2006 and 2010. So it's almost 12 years ago. So that was the thing. But then the US, obviously with regards to the setting, if you work in adult settings or pediatric settings, they have a computerized documentation system already in place, and you need to orient yourself. And then, it has all the fields that you need to go on, and most of the essential fields, will be there that are mandatory that you need to put in something. So technically you will be identifying what interventions you did and then how long you did for each of those interventions, because all those things are very critical for the reimbursement person to know in order to reimburse the OT services here. But on the positive side, like some clinicians, even in the US, lament about, oh, it takes so much time to document the services. But I'm always like, even as I said, even when it was not paying me anything extra, I was always up for documentation from my day one of my practice. And the reason for that is, documentation gives a lot of data for us, and data is powerful. So I'm always up for documentation. All OT practitioners, regardless of the country of practice, must document. And it gives a lot of data to look back retrospectively, and you can really you can use it for advancing your business on a profit side, and then advancing your science. You can do some retrospective study with the data. You could actually see what type of clients you're getting, and then kind of maybe target your marketing strategies to either tap into other areas or drill down more into that area based on your business strategies and stuff. And also, it gives a good data above all the other two reasons. It gives a lot of data for advocacy purposes. You can tell that, with X weeks of intervention or X hours of intervention, a stroke patient from this level has gone up to this level. So you can actually chart the data and then use that to convince your referral sources to refer clients to OT. And then we can use that data to advocate for, advanced OT services in all sectors. And we can use that data to present in the conference, present in stakeholder meetings, to show the value of occupational therapy. So I think documentation is something very, very critical and essential. And the Western world, for obvious reasons, have been doing this for a long time. And on the positive side, they have a lot of data, and that's why you're saying that for anything we have a data, because this society values the data. But I'm not telling that the other parts of the world doesn't value the data. They value, but I think the incentive for documentation is less compared to the Western world, I believe. That's all my perspective. Let me be very honest. It's all my perspective, and I could be wrong. And please feel free to disagree with me. But I think the incentive for documentation is relatively less in the South Asian world, in our country like India and places like that. So that's my take, and I think, if you let me talk about it, I'll just keep on talking. So let me stop here and then turn the control over to you, Dr. Murali Krishnan.
Thank you, Karthik. You brought out a very valid point, and then that's going to be the next question after we take everybody's opinion. Incentives for documentation, how it drives the therapist to document or not to document. And I also would like to know from the participants that, is it the incentives for the documentation which drives or blocks us, or is it that we ourselves are blocking ourselves from documenting because we feel we don't want to do, or is there any lack of skill or lack of intent to document, that if we document, then you become accountable? That means anybody can, bring in the point and then tell you, like, you told this, you did this and stuff. So are we somewhere afraid to take up this responsibility by documenting ourselves? And we will come back to this question, but before that, we will again go and say what are the tools and what are all the best practices they use in documentation. And dear participants, this is completely voluntary. If you wish to comment and if you wish to participate, we encourage you to participate actively. And if you don't want to comment, it is completely all right. And if somebody wants to say something, please show raise hands symbol in the sign section, and that would be easy for us to pick you up immediately. And Dr. Divisha, are you there?
Dr. Devesha Shirekar.
You can also drop in. You can also drop in a message in the chat section if you're not able to access your mic or something, because sometimes we have this technical difficulty with some of our participants where they are not able to use their mic. I'll move on to Dr. Gita Ojha. Dr. Gita, would you like to comment on that?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, Gita, please.
Yeah. Based on my practice, what I feel is like it's not only about incentive, it is to be being valued in the team. Because where I work in mental health, like documentation is like a must. It's very much necessary because of the Mental Health Care Act. And there is lot many things to be documented, and each team is like putting inputs. So in order to get yourself valued as a part of the team member, I think that is primary thing, because we have to speak the same language as a mental health professional. So familiarity with the terms and being more accessible with our documentation. And what the barrier I feel is like we have very less things which are available for Indian OTs as tools or as content also. Like there are no very, like there is nothing specific guiding I think like documents or literature which is available in the Indian context. So that is the one thing I feel we need to buck up and raise our standard for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gita, for bringing that the format or the assessment forms everybody follows. That's why I also wanted to discuss about the differences of documentation from the clinical practice as well as the college practice, because in the college we all teach this is how you document, this is how you assess a person, this is how you goal set a person. Is that practice being followed in the clinical practice is what we would like to see, and to what extent we are going in that. And again, coming back to what is the best tool you are using, or how you are documenting your field of work, Dr. Kiruba?
Yes, sir. I would, regarding documentation, I think it's quite a hectic job because of the back-to-back sessions we have. But I forgot to mention about my clinical experience as well. So I am a consultant occupational therapist in a private rehab center in Chennai. So I'm an academician and as well as a clinician. So as Mulisa was talking about, I teach my students how to document. On the other hand, when I go to the clinics, it's quite hard to follow what I teach. However, as Karthik sir said, I think he said in 2006, he would document using the files and all. That's the practice that we are doing in both the setups where I'm working. So we have separate files for each of the clients. So we have an assessment format, and we definitely complete all the assessments. All the details will be completed. And if necessary, any of the particular scales, a supported evidence is needed. For example, a client has issues in the balance, or he has issues in any particular component, that will be a specialized scale or a standardized assessment is definitely used. And regarding the progress notes, the assessment part is definitely, it's mandatory for all the clients, because if you don't have one, there's no record that we even treated the client. So that's mandatory, and we regularly update it. However, coming to the progress notes, it's quite hard to keep the progress notes. So in that thing, I think we have an issue, and as the others were explaining, there's no regular format as such. So in my clinical practices, I usually set my goals and then write down the interventions that I give, more of a in a descriptive manner. However, based on the client, it would change. For example, if a client keeps on bringing up one complaint on one day, another complaint on another day, it moves on to in a SOAP notes like that. So I would also have to practice SOAP notes. I have even written based on the SOAP notes, and I have records of that as well. So, but if you see me, that's because I know how it's what I have to stick to what I teach my students. So I started practicing that in the clinic as well. However, if you see the others, or even for me in the later stages, it becomes so hard because of the time factor and as well as the amount of content that we have to write in each file. So if we have something like the electronic document that the other parts of the country use, definitely that would be really useful for the Indian setting. And also, I would also request, or an area of discussion. We've been using this OTPF for quite some time, but however, in the clinical settings in Chennai are not much aware of the OTPF, and we are still sticking on to the uniform terminology. So I want, if the other members in this meeting, if you could tell me whether we can stick to the, not whether, can we adopt an Indian version of the OTPF, because it's really a huge document. The OTPF 4, it's quite a huge document. So to the time constraints, it's really hard to document according to the OTPF. So if we can come up with something that is more relevant to the Indian scenario, I think that will be really great. And if we could put it in an electronic format, I think that will be really great as well. That's for the first question that you asked. Yeah.
Valuable
Thank you, Dr.
points.
Kiruba, and that's a wonderful point. And then we definitely take a note of your comments on OTPF, and we will definitely have a internal discussion as well how we can proceed. And we would also like to have you, if we are going to materialize that work of OTPF in the picture, and we will discuss on that later. Now,
Okay.
Dr. Maya, would you like to comment on the first question?
Yes. As Dr. Gita and Dr. Kiruba said, I think I agree with most of them. It's not based on the incentive that we think of documentation, but we think mostly on how we are valued in terms of the company's system. And also I agree on the formats. We don't have electronic format system over here where we have standardized system to document the data. And standardized system of documentation such as an electronic system would be very useful for us, because it gives a standardized measure on evaluating documentation, and so that all the documentation is generalized and equal. When we cater to documenting manually, there's a tendency to have varied formats where we have a different evaluation format for each client. But when we use the electronic documentation system, the standard happens to be the same. Unfortunately, all companies in India don't have the documentation system where we can electronically fill in our evaluations and our therapy plans and our implementations for the day and for the month. So having an electronic system like US or most Western countries would be useful for the Indian system as well. So yes, as Dr. Kiruba said, we don't have a standard like US for documenting. We do still stick to the file system, and we do have documentation, even regular documentation pattern, even for evaluation, where we update it on a 6-month or 1-year basis. We don't stick to one evaluation system anymore. But having electronic system would definitely be useful in terms of having a standardized, having a standard for all the clients, so that everything is equal and it's uniform in manner, and we can document ourselves, document our therapy, help us improvise our client quality of care, so that we can cater to the client better. And definitely electronic system will be much better, so that we understand how well we're implementing ourselves. Also helps to remember how well we are catering to the client, what we would have done 6 months ago, 1 year ago. Without documentation, how can we remember how we're catering to a client? So documentation definitely helps us, and incentive shouldn't be a barrier to stop us documenting, because even as a professional, it helps us improve our quality of care and helps us remember how well we have catered to the client. If I want to look back 1 year or 2 years, I can just refer to the document and see how well I've done. If there's any difference in therapy plan or anything that I can add on to, if there's any change in the plan. So documenting will always help me to remember how well I've catered to the client, there's any changes I can help with the client, or there's any change I can make in the short-term plan, long-term plan, and also help me reflect back on how well I can improve the quality of care in the client. Definitely helps me as a professional, helps me as a professional to myself, helps me as a professional to the company, and helps me in terms of India also, in improving the quality of care in documentation in India. So yes, documentation in India can be improved from the record system to electronic system, is what I feel.
And I totally agree with what Maria said, because I mean, I should have said that as the first point. I mean, the documentation is very critical for clinical reasoning and monitoring, and monitoring the progress and re-evaluating your treatment plans. Well said. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Maria. This brought out this aspect of each person using different way of documenting, but presently the concern is like, even if they are using different ways or different methods of varied methods of documentation, are we even documenting? Because I recall an incident where when I came from my post-graduation and work in Mumbai to Chennai, I had an assessment report which will consist of 6 pages. And then because of the work need or workplace need, and then the people who are trying to understand the report, then I have to change the report to a 2-page report concisely. And this is one of the practical difficulties you face. So, it's not going to be a uniform method, I understand, for all of us to follow, but at least there has to be some sort of documentation process we need to follow, so that it gives an immense amount of input for all of us, so that we can improve ourselves and we can follow up what we have done. Otherwise, what happens is we end up doing the same thing over the years. 10 years down the line, we'll be doing the same sort of techniques all throughout in our clinical practice. At least people who are in the academic practice might have a change. That's what I feel, but I'm not even sure of that. Dr. Shirish, please comment.
Thank you. I was just going to add that, the primary incentive for documentation in some countries versus others has been the link to reimbursement. Most of us who are accountable and are connecting our documentation systems, whether they are on weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, we're doing it more diligently, I think, because how we are being reimbursed. The other part, and very significant aspect of documentation, is when you have continuity of care. That is not necessarily tied to you as a therapist. I may see the patient once or twice, but I need to maintain continuity of care if there are other practitioners after me, such as an assistant or another OTR who is also working with the patient. So how does that next practitioner come through and understand that this is exactly where this person left the services and needs to either adapt, modify, or carry on the plan of care forward? I think those are the ones that I think makes documentation such that, the context in which you're practicing. If you're the only therapist who's working with your patients and you pretty much have the continuity of care or the plan of care in some book or in your head, you don't necessarily need to leave elaborate notes. And if you are getting paid out of pocket by the patient directly without tying it to an insurance system or what have you, you may necessarily not be accountable for leaving detailed electronic medical records about the patient. So I think in the nutshell, as much as we'd like to improve documentation across the board as well as provide resources, I think the context drives it to a great extent.
Thank you, Dr. Shirish. For the time constraints, and I would like to invite Sukumar and Ashley to be a little brief in their comments if they are okay with it.
Sir, already all the things are discussed but to my idea, I just need some comments from the seniors regarding documentation. As a new entrepreneur, I have difficulties in managing quite a lot of cases in both the special school and the mental health center. So in this, we do basic and basic stuffs we follow in colleges. I'm still going through that, and a little amount of soap notes. And we do 3 months, I believe, 3 months revision of goals for the clients. At the same time, even I feel difficulty in setting goals when we discuss with the families, because even they do not have any plan for this mental health patients' future, whether we can engage them in an vocational setup or what they are going to, how we are going to reintegrate. Because long-term clients, chronic clients, I have the difficulty in decision-making process also regarding reintegrating them into their living space. So at the same time, this long-term clients with the in the school also, parents feel suddenly getting lost. What I have to do with this child after quite some time of intervention, and the child is ready to go to school, and they are not able to adapt to the and to compete with their age appropriate neurotypical kids, and they face lots of challenges. So in this regard, in decision making process and planning of further future plans for the kids, how we can use this documentation and proper planning to give suggestions for the parents and the clients. See, I'm unable to discuss and finalize after a certain amount of intervention. Their future is like at stake, and nobody is willing to regarding settlement, vocational settlement, or complete care at the home. It's been difficult for parents to take decision on it. So how this documentation will help us to take this kind of decisions and all. So I need all the seniors to give me suggestions regarding how to plan this ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Sukumar. Definitely, we will try to get somebody's input on this before this session ends. Dr. Ashley, would you like to comment?
Hello.
Yes, Ashley, please go ahead.
Ashley, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Dr. Mulli, can I comment?
Yes.
Dr. Gita, we will come back to you want to comment on Sukumar's question. I was planning to ask you only, but can we please wait till if Ashley can comment on this? Comment on the first question.
So it looks like Ashley is not on the list now. She probably left the call. So we have Nidhi, and then we have a person. It says a title says Unique Plus, probably Gita. So we have Gita and Nidhi if they want to talk their documentation practice or style.
Okay.
Nidhi, would you like to talk
if you're online, please go ahead.
A point was put forward a few minutes ago regarding academic practice and real world practice or clinical practice. So standing at the brink of both, I would say that yes, we are encouraged to use OTPF. OTPF4 is extensive as pointed out previously, and certainly a better solution for the Indian population would benefit scores of people, especially people with less experience. And I would say yes, there are a lot of constraints. We do not have the facility for maintaining EMRs, but we are encouraged to file. And as the saying always goes, if it's not on paper, consider that it's not done. So documentation does happen most of the places. We are encouraged to document in guidance or in concordance with the updated systems that are being followed globally and not just in the Indian context. But as the previous speakers also pointed out, we do have limitations, such as not having a uniform system where everybody documents in the same way. So my documentation will be very different from the next therapist who sees the same patient. So that again creates inconsistencies, which becomes a barrier. When we look at the continuum of care, it does become a barrier, because my way of approaching something might be very different from another person's way of approaching it. So a uniform method of documentation, if it is implemented, it will certainly be better. And one more point that I would like to add over here is the availability of standardized assessments or standardized instruments. So in long-term settings, yes, they are feasible, but in short-term acute settings, sometimes there are constraints like monetary constraints on not being able to procure those instruments, or sometimes there are even constraints on time where those things may not be feasible. It may not be feasible to use those standardized evaluation protocols. So putting it all in a nutshell, I think we do have a lot of things to learn as well as implement. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nidhi, on that important aspect of bringing in uniform methods in documentation. I understand that's going to be a little difficult for the Indian population, Indian occupational therapists, bringing in a uniform way of documenting, because each of us are looking different. This brings me to the next question, basically. Before that, I would like to invite Dr. Gita to, briefly comment on what Dr. Sukumar was asking, helping him in the process of documentation when it comes to mental health issues.
So just so that we clarify, we have two Gitas here. So the ID with a unique plus is also a Gita, and then there is a Gita.
Yes,
that,
Gita. Yes. Yeah,
so,
this is Gita.
So Gita Sambat, you please.
Yes, Gita Sambat from Coimbatore. Gita Sambat from Coimbatore. Hi, everyone. So same issues only. I'm working with pediatric for past years. Same issues only owing, because therapy for same assessment also. Assessment is different from therapist to therapist. So assessment as well as treatment interventions also. So as Nidhi said that we should have a common assessment and common interventions. Maybe standardized test. It will be good for in pediatric way. So same as mental health only, because our therapists having different views. I mean, while approaching a different type of patient, same patient, if I'm seeing the same patient, if Sukumar is seeing the same patient, so our views are different. So this is the main issue. So if we have common assessments or common, this is a way of documentation. So it will be useful for anything, maybe a pediatric or neuro or a mental health, anything. This is my point of view. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Gita. And Dr. Gita Oja, would you like to help Sukumar in the process of documenting in the mental health issues by your comments?
Yeah, I would just like to add that definitely mental health is a very complex documentation in mental health is definitely a very complex process. It's not only the fact that we have to document whatever we are doing, but we have to also document it in a way so that the team understands what exactly we are putting on. So it's both ways, and the thing is ki you have to explain the stakeholders also, and there is a lot of stigma and other things associated. So it making goals, formulating them and making them feasible is a very tough task. So what we do is, no doubt standardized tests are helpful, but we have very few tools at hand in the Indian setup. And particularly regarding the context, like for example, if I'm doing a forensic mental health evaluation, I think I don't have any tools at hand. So right from standing to ability to stand trial to the ability to maintain themselves, their self-care and property, everything, every small aspect of all this which are being asked by the court, I don't have any standardized tool at my hand. So what we follow in our clinical practice is use goal attainment scaling. So that is more or less, it gives us a opportunity to have a quantified method as well as a method which reflects on it, and it we can modify it for short term as well as long term. So that is a very useful tool. If you want, you can use that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gita, for briefly telling about the easy way of documenting for Sukumar. And this the whole discussion with everybody poured in with your comments, and then what I could see or what I could figure out from this is the difference of the Indian ones who are practicing in India, the ones who are connected abroad, the way of the thinking process as well as the way of documentation method. Now, this brings in, for Indian context, why, see, Nidhi, perfectly matched it in the academic process. Nidhi or, I'm sorry, I think Kiruba mentioned it. I'm sorry, I missed out on who mentioned it. But in the teaching practice, we all teach and we all learn how we need to document. But when it comes to clinical practice, when we become clinicians, somehow we don't follow that documentation process. Somehow we miss out. Is it because we feel there is no uniformity in the documentation process, or is it because that we don't want to do it? I know I'm touching the sensitive area. Is it that my incapability or my insecurity when it comes to documentation which is haunting me to document? Not just the insurance process, because in India we don't have insurance process, but we are responsible to answer the parents. Even in the direct eyes of the parents, we don't provide much of the documentation. And why do you think, or we are not following documentation when in this case? Anybody who can comment on this, please raise your hands or unmute yourself and go ahead.
Sir, this is Sukumar here. In our setting scenario, actually, as an NGO, we are unable to procure or whatever the standardized tests. Lack of resources, first point I want to add. We don't have standardized scales or tests which we can administer with our clients. This is our first lack of resources, we said. And definitely there is a big trouble in having the time for documentation. As we work in the rural area, the therapist patient ratio is high. So for a client, for a therapist, we have 20 to 25 kids. They are coming on a daily basis, actually. And at the same time, we are providing support continuously with the family members. So, so another thing is the lack of time. And we also have difficulty in managing time, as well as same time when we maintain the documents on a paper. It is like on the end of the year, there are huge amount of papers stored in a single file, and we don't have enough space to store it also, and we don't have enough area to stock the thing, because as I'm running the school for past 5 years, there is after a completion of year, we have around some 40 to 50 kgs of paperwork for our 50 to 60 clients, and it comes around. It's a huge task to maintain it manually. So this is another difficulty which we face. Definitely, these are the things, and we don't lack of incentives also. Because when I expect my junior, one of the therapists to document 25 cases on a regular basis, they lose interest also, and they have to have regular meetings with the client, and so many difficulties like time management and parents support in fixing because all the parents here need complete guidance from the therapist. When we ask parents what is the expectation, they again ask us what can we do about this, and everything we have to do. These are the things which we face in documentation and planning with the therapies.
Thank you, Sukumar. And this is why I think the documentation is also important, because if you have the document of the goals and then what we have been working and what has been the improvement, it is easy for us to explain the parents, and they will also know if the document has been shared with the parent. They would also know, basically the client, not just the parent. They would also know the amount of work we have put in, the amount of time they have also worked on, and where we are now. So your explanation to them gets less. You don't have to explain. The report itself is self-explanatory in that case, I think. Now again, bringing it back, the paper-wise, we have. See, it is up to us to move from the paper file category to laptops and systems and Word documents, and even now you have software where you speak out, you say something, record something, and then that can get transferred into a verbatim. Then you can easily correct it. That's available there. Why we are not using this? Why we are not using this new methods, or why we are not getting the intent to document in a different format? Because I understand paper file is there for a long time. Are we not moving forward from the paper file because we don't want to move, or we don't want to document it? Anybody else would like to comment on this?
Actually, I was about
Karthik,
to
would you
ask
like
a
to pitch
question.
in?
You brought that up, Murali. Thank you for that. And so, of course, why are we still documenting in paper is my first question. And I really want some of you who are practicing OT in India to answer this. And what's the barrier from the transition from paper to system? And also, what other professionals like physical therapists, social workers, psychologists, are they having a documentation, or are they also still documenting on paper? If they are documenting using a system, then we could go to that vendor and then see, work with them to develop a customized OT version of the assessment form or the system, and then move from there. So I just really have these two questions because I've been out for more than a decade there. So what is that barrier that preventing us from transitioning from paper to electronic system of documentation, number one, and number two, what other professionals are using to document?
For the initiation aspect, I can put in, there are few softwares available, there are few apps available where you can just put in the keywords, and then that brings you a little bit of a report. Some of the, like Practo and stuff, they have this kind of reports. But as far as I know, my psychology friends use more of systems. They don't use the papers anymore. Even if they are using the papers, those same formats of assessments are transferred into soft copies. Coming back to Sukumar's question of how do I get rid of that 40-45 kg of paper, what I would suggest is just scan it and then put it in a soft file and drive it to the cloud, or put it in your hard drive, which is going to be more easier. You can share it with the client for their referral as well, which will be much more easier. Even if your therapist doesn't want to type and record it, they can write it, and then you can just scan it over. But the thing is, at least to some extent, we need training in this is what I need to put in my report, what to put, how to put. Why I'm bringing this up again and again is, I funnily quote during my PG time when I was writing my theory exam, in the sensory integration, aspect, Wilbarger protocol, in the flow of the hair follicle growth has been the norm of Wilbarger brushing. But on the second day or the third day, when I went for practicals, the research paper came out that you can brush against the hair follicle growth also. So in a matter of time, it changes. Unless until the documentation has been done for this, I would not know. And they would not suggest this. So this is also important, how in a bit of time things can change, and you are also on the safer side. You have done your work, and correctly quoted by Dr. Shirish that continuum of care is very important. The continuum of quality of care is very important. Even if I am not there, my therapy process has to be there, and that has to be followed by the other therapists where they are going. They can go to a different state in India, they can go to a different state in European countries, or from the European countries to India. We would follow the same thing. So the care for the client is not hampered because the therapist has changed, which should be the motive of all of us. You know, in this note, we still haven't got the answer for what exactly is stopping us from documenting. Dr. Kruba, I see your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so okay. Regarding that, I feel since I'm working in a clinical, child rehab center as well. If you take the awareness among the parents, currently we can say maybe 20 to 25% of the parents are keen to know what we are documenting. However, the rest 75% are giving us the authority to do whatever we want, or they are not even aware what should be done. In that case, I feel that maybe I might touch a little sensitive part here. I think OTTs are taking a upper hand here, and we are sometimes not ready to completely be sensitive to the needs of the parents, or to continue the quality of care. We don't do that. And however, in a multi-rehab center, definitely, because we are working along with the other professionals, we are forced to do, or to show our domain, we have to do it. And another aspect I feel that we don't do it is that there's no strong scrutinization in an Indian setup. For example, if it is in hospital setup, definitely we have the inspections coming up, so we have to keep all the documents ready. For example, NEBS inspection comes, definitely I have to show all my documents. However, in the clinical setting, there's no scrutinization like that. Only if the management is ready to take some strong decisions, and if they are going to be faithful to the profession, then that will happen in that area. So in case if the association, or if we have definitely the association takes up a step wherein they can scrutinize, or they can bring up probably rate the clinics according to the documents or the quality they provide. I feel there would be a better, we would find better ways to document. And coming to the point that you said, is it that we don't know to document? I would again take 50% of the therapists are really documenting quite good. However, the rest 50% is struggling to do it. So in that case, probably we can come up with an editable PDF. If we are forced to do something like that, we can come up with an editable PDF or something wherein we can just check the drop-down box, tick wherever you want. That would be a easier way to do that. And text speak to text apps, and there are for certain standardized tools like Isha, we have an app, so you can type the details of the client, kid's name and everything, and then you can document it. If any apps or anything like that comes up, and again, we need to spend some time. Time is a huge constraint in an Indian context. We see a lot of caseloads, and the private clinics are actually they are finding it really hard to allot cases to the therapist. In that case, time is a huge constraint. So if we can come up with these ideas and make it a little stronger, I feel we can actually improve the profession's quality as such.
Thank you, Dr. Krupa. Improving profession's quality by bringing in a quality documentation process is a valid point. Now, take this forward. How do we think we can improve, or how do we think we can encourage the therapist, let that be a junior or a young one who is coming in, or the senior who has been so used to doing paper documentation work, or even if it is paper, the documenting habit, how do we inculcate, how do we encourage it with the therapist? What would be your suggestions? Can I throw this question to Dr. Shirish, especially looking at the Indian scenario?
I think specifically looking at the Indian scenario, it might be helpful to allow younger OTs, the upcoming population, entry-level practitioners to know about how documentation is carried out across different settings in different countries. So I think exposing them to electronic medical records through a platform, showing them how we do documentation in Florida versus someplace else in the world or in different setting, whether it's related to mental health, pediatrics, geriatrics, and other practice settings. I think it's very important for them to be exposed to these different platforms, at least to have some baseline knowledge, and then giving them ideas where they can take this information and make it their own, be creative and innovative in order for them to not necessarily restrict themselves to the constraints or limitations. We all know there are limitations and constraints in every context, even if you are in a Western world. But knowing that the human brain is very innovative and creative, if you know about something or you hear about something, and then you take ideas from different parts and you connect them in a manner where it works for your context, and it may take multiple iterations. It may not happen overnight, but ways to come up with ideas, because to be frank, we all know what we did for documentation back in India. As far as I remember, way back 20 years ago, you know, the kind of documentation we did was usually 2 lines in a hospital that passive range of motion completed, and you know, just document the patient's response in 1 or 2 sentences. That wouldn't cut it here. I mean, that wouldn't require an OT in my context at all. It may require a nurse or a nurse's aide to carry on the services. So I'm just giving an example that, you know, if a student or an entry-level practitioner in India would see their 2 or 3 sentences that they wrote in a hospital medical record and then be exposed to a different documentation system, whether it is a combination of paper and electronic, whether it's hybrid or strictly electronic, to see how they can improve on. And I think, this is the last comment I'll make, is I think this should be a undergrad or post-grad student project. I think we should encourage faculty across the world, including in India, to ask students to look into how they can create their projects or their thesis or study more on the benefits, the limitations and challenges around documentation system, and encourage those students, mentor and advise those students to spread that information far and wide as a part of their projects or thesis required for successful graduation.
I just want
Thank
to
you,
add
Dr.
a
Shirish.
couple
We
of
do
things.
cover up the documentation process. Sorry, Karthik, please go ahead.
Okay, just like real quick, just to in response to what Kripa has shared. So one thing, Kripa, that I want to point out is associations are, you know, sort of an advocacy organizations. They don't have the regulatory authority to inspect and regulate clinics there. You know, say for even in the US, the American OT Association or any state association doesn't have the authority to go for an inspection into a setting. So that is like a government's job. So here the state organizations, regulatory bodies are there in place to do those jobs. And I think they have the more control and regulatory authority. So it needs to be done through the legislative channels, and coming up with a TNOT council and stuff like that would really help on the state level or national level council, and they can really enforce regulations. But you know, associations or basically advocacy organizations for the profession. But definitely, you know, on the other side, associations could jump in and help us. They can, like publish documents and resources like OTPF, like, you know, like some comparable version to that in the Indian context. And they can tie up with a software documentation system company, and then make that available to the practitioners in India. So there are other ways, but all these are like supportive and encouraging measures that can be done by the association. So just want to clarify that advocacy versus regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, as a follow-up, just to piggyback on what Dr. Lala said, is basically, yeah, it's a great way to expose them. But I have a related question on that. Is we have several institutions offering master's degree MOTTs, and all of them are requested to complete a dissertation or a project, I believe. And I remember that even in back like almost 10 years or 11 years ago, not even 11, probably like a little more than that, one of my classmates, my UG classmates, was pursuing an MOT, and he did some sort of a translation of a Western tool into Tamil language, because I did the translation for him from English to Tamil and helped him validate that. So we have so many students pursuing MOT nowadays, and if they can really like tackle upon, or if they're already doing all these translation validations and stuff, I think the practitioners can tap into that, and we need to find some sort of a center, a clearing house where all these resources are pulled together for practitioners access, so that they can actually, oh yeah, the Tamil version of this scale exists. This scale has been validated for Indian context of practice, or this new scale has been developed through an MOT project study for this purpose. So I think there may be some resources that are like very much secured in within the walls of the library, or some constraints of the building. I think we need to start disseminating and sharing data, and of course we still need to develop more Indian context-based tools and outcome measures, and also we need to we don't have to do it from the scratch. If there are some good tools that just needs to be validated or standard.
I think we lost Karthik there, is it?
That is correct. I don't see Karthik speaking.
Okay.
He's frozen.
So let me take it further in this. I may differ a little in this point from Karthik, because the UG students also have projects, and then the PG students also have projects. But the problem is, for them, completing the project is more important than bringing in a quality validation to the tool, which, being there as a guide for the PGs and the UGs for almost 13 years now, I know how and what they do. And now brings this brings the quality of the tool what we will get. But yes, as clinicians, as academicians, as researchers, we have quite a bit, good quality people coming out of India, and like they are all over the world. If they can do this same work and bring in validating tools or creating new tools for the Indian scenarios, would be a greater benefit for the community as well as for the profession, is what I feel. This is one thing I wanted to state. And the other aspect is not just the tool validation, not just bringing in the standardized assessment tools. Even if that is not there, a regular demographical data to a regular write-up SOAP notes, maintaining it, because we all have organ anatomy as the subject in our 4th year and 3rd year, we still don't follow it up. This is there in our UG and PG as well, but we still don't follow it up. Only because it's the time constraints, and we feel there are a number of clients, and then we as therapists need to fill in the slots. I'm sorry, Karthik, we lost you a little bit in the middle.
Yeah. So I'm just joined from my phone now. I don't know, something. It says, hold on, we'll connect you back to the meeting. So my apologies for that. It's totally out of my control. All right.
Just a minute. I'm just going through something, and then we will give it to you back.
Sure. No worries.
So the focus has to be documenting, so that we as people have the responsibility that my job is being clear, that everybody can come back and visit my page and say, okay, this has been my job. I have done my job. I'm exposing myself, or I'm letting people know I have done my responsibility. This is where personally, I still say, this is my personal opinion, that we are a little skeptical on putting ourselves under the microscope, is what my opinion has always been. The way I see, or the way I mingle up with people, is we don't want people to question us that, you don't know this, or you know this, and I don't have time, or I don't have to answer. And especially when it comes to clinical practice, we are our own bosses. There is nobody's going to monitor us, because there is no regulatory body as of now in India. Especially coming to documentation process. And to the parent, pediatric population wise, we feel we are a little sometimes over the top. So we take it for a little granted is what I feel. Not all the therapists, of course. So we do not even explain the parents. And that is not because we don't document or we don't tell people, sometimes because we don't know how to document, we don't know how to explain what we are doing with the client. That is also the, again, circling back to the first question of, is there any lacunas or is there any, skill level competencies we need to improve on, we need to, seriously practice. That is also lacking, even though we have studied organ admin. I'll open this for others to comment. Karthik, please go ahead with yours.
So just
small request, sir,
couple of
for
things.
Murli sir and academicians who are here. As Karthik sir said, I second his thought that the academic institutions can give it as a group project for their UG and PG students and let them involve every branches, and they can provide the UG students as a support staff for them, junior researcher or whatever it is, and create a culture for creating these kind of tools, which will be very tough for the clinicians to develop on their own. As Murli sir said, all great occupational therapists are produced, or they are coming from the best academic institutions only. So this is the right place. That is the right place where we can pull in more funding for the research, and we need to have a system. Even the advocacy organizations like IOTA can pitch in, and they have to develop a system or a competition kind of stuff for a group projects from all its registered organizations. This is a suggestion, sir. So definitely we need to have some academic institutions to pitch in to support the clinicians and create a big data source for assessments and follow-ups.
Thank you, Sugu, for that wonderful thought. This is one of the seed in the IOTT's mind already, which we would want to sponsor, or we would want to be part of that kind of a study when somebody is pitching in. We are also having a discussion on how we are going to implement when somebody comes up with a good idea or good validation of a tool idea. And research-wise, yes, we have good people to guide through the research. And funding-wise, we are working on how, maybe not the full funding, but we would definitely help out in some way. But that's again in the thinking process. We haven't taken a decision yet on that. We will definitely discuss this in the future meetings.
So real quick, I know that I got disconnected. So what I was saying is basically, yeah, just use the MOT students, to come up with all these tools and measures and stuff. And I think we need to make these projects more need-based. So the practitioners communities, identifying a lot of need here, and I think these needs should be addressed through those projects. I think we should kind of guide and encourage the students to pick up a need-based project and providing solutions to the contemporary issues that affect our profession. Already, I know that, we just hit that 75-minute mark. So I think, we just kind of like move on, Dr. Muralikrishnan, let's move on to the final thoughts that everyone has and concluded, because we don't want to hold them for too much longer. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, for your wonderful comments, and we have noted down some of the points, which we will take it forward for the future meetings. If you have anything else to reach out to us, please reach out to us through our, blog as well as the email. And the final comments will be like, some of you have already started commenting on it, how we are going to encourage and how we are going to make sure everybody follows the documentation and how beneficial it would be for us. Quickly, please.
May I, sir?
Please go
Nidhi
ahead.
here.
Nidhi,
So
please
yes,
go ahead.
Kiruba ma'am had spoken about this drop-down menu option. That really sounds like a very peaceful option, considering that it'll take less amount of time in comparison to writing down each and everything, and that is going to be very helpful even for new people entering into the profession. Adding on to that, if we are able to set up goals, like Sukumar sir said, a lot of people don't know what they actually expect out of therapy or out of what their long-term goal is or what their long-term outlook is. So if we are able to, in the initial process itself, if we are able to make an extensive list or make an extensive plan on what needs to be worked upon, and then maybe use goal attainment scaling, or maybe use something like a checkbox kind of thing on how we have worked on those goals as each therapy session progresses, and also document how the patient is progressing and achieving each of their goals by means of using a simple grid method also. I think that will be very helpful for us to track progress and also to justify our profession. Like, okay, this is the progress that I'm showing and this is the unique contribution that I am adding on in this patient's life, and adding on to the credibility of the profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Yar. Thank you, Nidhi. And anybody else? Of course, that's a wonderful idea, drop-down option by Kripa and Nidhi. We will definitely think on this.
Yes, sir. Sir, one idea is like now they have discussed, right? Our Ravi Shankar sir from Madura has developed one special education assessment and treatment planning app. Like that, we have to develop for ourselves in each branches. So the academic institutions can definitely pitch in making these kind of documents for the clinicians. The clinicians can do a funding for that projects. This is my suggestion.
Yes, Suku. Suggestions definitely taken, but I'm afraid it's going to be a difficult task. Institutes working on this, and we have no, we will not be in any position to request them or do that. But yes, from our end, this could be a possible way of starting something because it's going to involve a lot of cost and brain, and we will definitely put it forward and think in the team how we can implement this. Dr. Kirva, you wanted to say something?
Yes, sir. I just want to add 3 final points to improve the documentation. Probably we should educate our therapists on how to document. When I started working in the clinical setup, the first I remember taking a session on how to document to all the therapists in the clinic. So encouraging them and educating them on the recent or even the basic documenting methods would help improve them to document our sessions. And second thing, as you raised a question in the beginning, incentives would definitely help. Probably in a week, we were asked to complete documentation once in a week. So if they are given at least an hour time, and the incentives will, if we could provide incentives for them for documenting, probably that would also increase the number of times we document. And finally, as everybody was saying, research on easy administration of the documentation is mandatory at this point. And when everybody was talking about increasing research in the academic settings, yes, we do train our students to validate the studies and validate the scales in Tamil. However, it never crosses the library. So because again, due to the funding issues, if we could focus more on that and come up with more ways of documenting, I think that would definitely help. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kirpa. I think the problem with validation and scale formation is as clinicians or as researchers, we don't value that validation that much, and the scale dies in that project alone. After that, it doesn't come up. Probably what we can suggest in the same colleges or the neighboring colleges is reuse the skills, reuse the same methods. And then we call that the cheat method in research, that we start citing our own friends for many journals. Probably, I'm not asking to cheat, but I'm saying we can start running on the same scale or running on the same validation for many projects more, so that becomes a regular use of a scale or regular use of a process. Probably that would help. That would also bring in the credibility. Um, this is what I feel.
I
So
have one
Anybody
question
else?
to
Anybody else?
sir. Is
real
it
quick.
possible? Sorry, is it
Sukumar,
possible?
just give me 1 second, because this is in follow up with Kripa's comment so that we don't lose the thought. So Kripa, just a suggestion I have for you is, when your students, in your institution and other institutions as well, for all academicians here, when students does like a validation of a scale or a translation validation of a scale, existing scale or something, probably, just kind of like make a PDF or an electronic version of that tool available on your college's website or something, like tools validated through our student projects or something, with a title or on a particular web page. So that way, before the entire project goes into that, at least that the tool version is available through some platform to the public. And it is also important to make the OT in the practitioner community aware of such resources, so they can go to the SRM website or Manipal website, and then look for the tools developed by the students, and if there is something relevant to the practice, they can download. So that the hard work done by the student projects and the faculties is put to work and becomes useful. Thank you.
Yeah, sir.
That's very
question to Karthik,
very
sir.
well put, Karthik.
One question to Karthik, sir.
Sure.
This is my doubt. The uniform standard of practice,
Yeah.
which is actually done in Western countries, I think so. So, will it be feasible for any of our organization like IOTA or whatever it is? Will it be possible for you all to support and implement the uniform standard of practice in various parts of India, all over India?
Yeah, I think, if you really look at the OTPF document that is being developed by, the AOTA, the American OT Association. So the first version of it is called the Uniform Terminology. I think it was back in 1989 or something is when the first version of it got published. And then when they updated to the next version, they changed the title to OT Practice Framework. And I think we definitely need, even going one step further, I would say we need more Indian context-based models of practice. Some of these Western models, doesn't ring a bell in the Indian context, because the Western society is more of independence, and we are more about interdependence. So we need to first of all think about the basic. Of course, we need to take the basic concepts and principles, that is going to be common all over the world. But then we need to come up with the models of practice pertaining to Indian setting, and that will also drive, with the terminology and other things. But to your point, yes, some organization should take up the mantle to develop an Indian version, or the Indian version of the OTP. We don't have to call it the same way, but I think it is a process where we need to engage all the stakeholders involved. So it is not like something that we can draft or something. We need to first of all invite everyone, see the problems and the clientele they are addressing. We need to put together a big task force and invite stakeholders to comment and provide input. And it's a process. Even if you look at the OTPF development process, each of the OTPF will provide a summary of how it was developed. Even just to changing a version, it took many years to develop. Having said that, it's not an excuse. We should get started at least now, so that in a few years we have the first version available. But I think as long as we follow the due process, it will become a very robust and useful document for the entire OT community. So that's my input. We could either start this at a national level or at a state level. And one other thing that I want to emphasize here is, some of our students may be some of our practitioners are good clinicians, but they may have some challenges with English, the language. So I think we should also start encouraging, more on documentation. It could be either in English, or if they're very comfortable documenting in Tamil, that's totally fine. I have published a book a few years ago about OT terms in Tamil, where I provided OT terminology for 500 OT terms. So either like, like Tamil and combined with English or whatever they're comfortable with. The key is documenting the surveys to generate valuable data for practice and for the profession. So we need to encourage in all those directions. But having said that, yes, I totally agree with you that we need a similar uniform terminology document for the Indian context of practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Karthik. Running out of time, so
yes.
quickly.
Please request our academic council of IOTA to take in this matter.
Yes, Dr. Sugu, I will definitely put this one in the upcoming EC meeting. But again, making this practically possible, what I can do is I can put it to the committee and then see, because there are other lots of practical difficulties when it comes to implementing this, and we will discuss this. This for the another day's program. Now, further going in, Dr. Shirish and Maria, please provide your final inputs.
I think it's a good start to have many people, many stakeholders voice their platform. I think the challenge of having something uniform, as much as is that we can have uniform terminology, we can have uniform standards of practice, but when the rubber meets the road and implementing them in different contexts and different practice areas and settings, I don't think uniformity, especially given the nature of occupational therapy, is what we should aim for. All settings are so unique and so different in the way they work. And I think expecting uniform practice standards or uniformity sometimes may take away from the essence of occupational therapy. As many of you mentioned that, all of us are different. All of us look at our practices through different lenses. And I see some of the conversations are heading towards more uniformity, more standards. But at the same point of time, I think that may not necessarily be a good thing. I think it may not be possible. So when it comes to some of these documentation or related issues too, I don't think uniformity is what we need. We can look at some strategies, some best practices, and some evidence, but it may take our knowledge, especially our creativity, on how we can make it work in our own settings. Sometimes it may not. As I mentioned before, it may require multiple iterations. And I also understand that global society as such is changing. The Indian society as such is also changing and evolving. I have left India close to 17 years ago. So although Indians, as far as I know, may not be as independent in some ways, and this is me making a very generic statement, I do know that there are changes in the society, even in India, where they are valuing independence, even at a younger and older ages, where people from certain age groups, even the elderly, are saying, why do I stay dependent on my son? Or why do I stay dependent on my family? And they're choosing to move into centers for the elderly. I don't think they are called nursing homes or anything specific like the US, but I know that there are generations to come that may start valuing independence and may choose to live in alternative living placements rather than aging at home. So with that said, I think, we may put something together now, but it may be subject to change rather quickly given the society is evolving and changing. So just a thought to keep things more doable. I don't think uniformity necessarily is a gold standard.
Thank you, Dr. Shirish. That's a wonderful, wonderful thought. And then that is definitely needed. It's not just, we need to go into one direction. We need to keep our options open, and being occupational therapists, being, diverse in our thought process as well as the work. We need to keep our essence alive and intact. Quickly, can I get closing comments from Dr. Maria and Gita Oja, please?
Dr. Maria here. Yeah, so to conclude, I think documentation is very important to bring uniformity, standardization, help with clinical reasoning, monitoring, and helping an individual as a therapist to improve their quality of care in terms of monitoring oneself, monitoring the institution, catering to the client, catering to the parent, and helping improve quality of life and quality of care in the therapist as well as the client and the client caterer. So I feel documentation is very important, and emphasizing on documentation is important so that we can improve ourselves as a quality care provider, and also to improve the quality of care in individuals that we cater to, so that we can monitor ourselves and try to bring a standardization in our therapy care. In order to that, based on what has been spoken in this talk, I think based on what all the speakers have spoken, it seems that we might benefit from electronic documentation, and it might help in bringing uniformity. I think uniformity in documentation will help us in bringing in a standard treatment protocol and help in treatment stratification, so that treatment is standard for every client and we are not biased based on preferences or based on our preferences. So I really believe in standardized documentation, standardizing documentation, which will help in terms of uniformity, because when we cater to uniformity in client therapy, it helps in treatment stratification so that each client gets standard quality, and that our standardized and our quality doesn't differ from therapist to therapist and client to client. So definitely I feel uniformity also is catered to in terms of documentation. So which is what I feel. And I also feel that translations and Western translations in the tool might help in terms of catering to Indian population. Since I'm a Tamil, I'm talking of Tamil scale. If it's North India, they're probably catering to a Hindi scale for Indian context. And it helps in standardizing, also based on a value system. It helps because, as Sir said, Western tool will be catering to a more independent population. We are not as independent as the Westernized world. So translating the Western tool to Indianized population will be also useful. I also feel that emphasizing on documentation for the young practitioners would also be helpful, as Dr. Srishi mentioned, and continuum of quality care would also help. So this is my viewpoint on documentation in India and how it might help based on what we've spoken.
Thank you, Dr. Maria. And I'm going to take a final comment from Dr. Gita, and then I'm going to summarize the major points we have taken. Dr. Gita, you have anything to say? Okay. I know we are running a little late on a given time. Let me summarize, important points, what we have finally came up with. One is like the drop-down options for the report, or the electronic option of the report would be a better option for documenting purpose. And that also will address most of the concerns. Most of us have been expressing that there should be an uniformity in documentation. We should encourage the uniformity in documentation, and especially the uniform documentation or standardization of documentation, particularly related to Indian culture and Indian work system, would be well appreciated. And we also have to understand, we also established that not necessarily it has to be uniform all the time, but at the same time there has to be some level of freedom to go out of the box and go out of the line which is drawn as well, which is also needed being an occupational therapist and being a country where we have different cultures, different languages, and different ecological background for us. At the same time, there is one more point which brought that we need to figure out how we can form the equalized version of OTPF. We will definitely think on this. This is going to be one of our future projects in IOTT. We will definitely think on this. Forming an easy way of reporting is one which I think we have already discussed on this. But emphasizing the documentation process and then bringing in the incentives for documentation is a good idea. This can be encouraged. This can be a new way even for the clinicians. The incentives can come in a different aspect, many ways. Like your report can be charged when you're giving a good report, or your a subordinate giving a proper report can be given extra credit for their appraisal. Can be, or if you want to bring in the quality one, then everybody does the documentation properly. If someone doesn't do it, you're going to cut down on them. I know this is like talking somebody from a management perspective, but this is something to ponder over. And of course, the documentation will definitely help us in the best practices and keeping the evidences alive, so that as professionals, we help our profession to grow. To explain it to any other professional or any of the team, they would understand us better when we give a solid evidence of proof that this is how our work happens and this is how our goal setting happens. This is how our frames of references and our approaches and our therapy techniques are evolved or utilized or brought in a different benefit to the client. And in overall, the quality of care and the quality of the profession will go one step higher if the documentation practiced better. And it is up to all of us, all the therapists, to keep it up going. And this has given us some very valuable, very insightful thoughts on some of the research aspects, some of the work areas as an IOTT we look at. With this, I invite anybody who would like to join us in forming any of the topics here, or if you have any other topic in your mind also to take it ahead, we would always be happy to welcome you in a productive way for the development of the profession in the Indian perspective, which is the core motive of Indian Occupational Therapist Think Tank Forum. So with this,
thank you so much, Murali. That's an excellent summary. I know we're already running too much out of time, so thank you everyone for spending your valuable Saturday evening with us and sharing your insight. This has been a wonderful conversation. The recording will be made available on our YouTube channel soon. Keep the conversation going. If you have additional thoughts for IOTTT, please email them to indianotThinktank@gmail.com. And also I invite you to visit our blog and comment on our resources, whether it was useful or not, etc. Until we see you next time for another wonderful Saturday night chat session, we are signing off on behalf of IOTTT. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.